Hello everyone, in this episode we are practicing our nodes and texturing. So I've got a few basic exercises for you to try at home. Now make sure you've looked at the previous episode, Beginner's Guide to Nodes, and this is a continuation of that. This is all part of our much bigger course on gabbit.co.uk where you can go right through from beginners to advanced. If you want to support me, I do have a Patreon account. And lastly, there's a Discord server. If you're stuck and have any issues, there's lots of helpful people on there. All the links are in the description. So as usual, I'll show you the exercise and then you have a go at doing it yourself, and then I'll show you how I would have done it. So here we have the first one, just a simple ball on a plane. You may notice that it's got nice soft shadows and the tiniest hint of a reflection. That's because I've got an HDRI in the background, and also I've made the background transparent. So your first objective is to build a ball, a plane, an HDRI background, and make it transparent. Have a go at that. Okay, so how did I create this? Well, I'll press Shift Spacebar to come out of full screen mode, and down the bottom here, I've changed from the timeline to the node editor. I'll start a new layer so I can start completely afresh, and I'll press Shift Z to come out of rendered mode, so I'm on solid mode. Let's press Shift S to get the cursor into the center. Now when I add something with Shift A, I can add a cube. You can also go add down here, and you've got your add options here as well. Now why have I chosen a cube when we've got a sphere? Well, actually a cube that's subdivided turns into a sphere and it's much easier to unwrap. So if I press Ctrl 3, that's a shortcut to subdivide. So if I go to my modifiers here, it adds a subdivision surface modifier. If you don't want the shortcut, you can just go add modifier, subdivision surface. I'll actually turn it up to 4 and I'll set it to smooth shading. So there's our ball. Let's bring that up. Shift A, plane, scale that out, and there's our floor. Let's just make sure it is perfectly on the floor, and it is. That's great. So now I need to set up the background material. In order to do that, I need to come down here in the node editor to the world tab. So I'll click on that, move this up. Now my nodes may look slightly different. Someone asked me to change the text so it was easier to see. But my nodes should be exactly the same as yours. And you'll see that I've got an environment texture into my background when I'm clicked on the world tab here. You should see just this area, and I've brought in an environment texture. And to do that, you press Shift A, texture, not image texture, but environment texture. That's a common mistake, and that won't work. So environment texture, and you'll get that node. Then you click on Open, and find an HDRI. HDRI Haven is a great site for that. And I believe I chose one of these ones because they're sort of a mid-grey in colour and won't affect our textures too greatly. You can choose a different one, of course, and download one that's got an interesting colour and see how it affects your textures, but it does have quite a big impact, the colour of your HDRI. I'll delete that one. Hook this one up again just by left-clicking and dragging across. Generally, colours go into the same colour. Now if I press Shift Z to go into rendered mode, my HDRI is working. You can also get to rendered mode here. Now in order to make it transparent in the background, you click on the render tab up here, go down to film and tick the transparent option there. Okay, so we've reached that point. I did also add a sun lamp, but that's not too important. If you want to add one, Shift A, lamp, sun. The next one I want you to look at is this one here. Quite simply, it's a glass ball on a plane. Have a go at that. Okay then, so Shift Z to come out of full screen mode, and let's click on the ball, but I don't see the node information here. That's because I'm still on the world tab. You need to go to the object tab. Now when I right clicked on the ball, I didn't select it. Right click again, it should appear. It's difficult to select things in render mode, so you might want to press Shift Z and go back to solid mode to select things, then you can see the outline, and Shift Z to get back into rendered mode. So quite simply, I've just brought my glass shader in. So if I close this down and create a new shader, that's what you'll see at the beginning. I can click on this one and press Shift S, and then that gives me the option to change this shader to the glass. Now I wanted to point out something about glass. It's both reflective and translucent, and you can change the roughness of the glass here, and also the color of the glass. I'll just put that back. And it also has what's called caustics, so when the light goes through the glass, it breaks up and does funny things, to use technical terms from physics. Also, the color of light comes through and it bounces around and does stuff as well. But whilst all that is realistic, it does take up render time. So always consider is glass absolutely necessary in your renders, and you might want to fake glass in other ways, but more about that another time. Let's go to the next one. Just go to full screen mode. So this time I've added an image to my plane. It doesn't have to be the same image as this. I think this was from textures.com. So download your own texture from textures.com and paste it on your plane. But what you may also notice is that the floor has a slight bump to it. Now there's a couple of ways of doing this. I've done it the quick and easy way, but see how you get on. So shift space to come out of full screen mode. Let's click on our floor, and this is my setup. So I've got an image texture going into the color of a principled BSDF. The principled BSDF is a great shader and offers nice realistic results, which is what we're trying to achieve. It's also got a bump coming from the image texture. Now that's a cheater's way of doing it, but it's quick and easy and nice for beginners with okay results. So have a go at that. So how did I make that? Let's start afresh. So whenever you've got a texture and you want to create a new one on the object, you can close it down and press new. So if I click on this and press Shift S and go to the principled shader, I've now got my principled shader in, and I want to add an image texture to put it into the color. So let's press Shift A, texture, image texture. Put that in there, find our file. Handy button here is so you can see your images, and I think that's the one I chose. Paste that in and hook up the color. Now if you don't see it, that's because you haven't unwrapped your plane. Now if you want to know more about unwrapping, do look at the card in the corner, and there's links in the description. But the simple way to unwrap is let's go into solid mode with Shift Z on this viewport, into edit mode, U to unwrap, and if it's a plane you can just unwrap it. Now Blender will know where to put the 2D texture onto the 3D object. If it's a more complex shape, you go U, Smart UV Project, to quickly unwrap your object automatically. Okay, so back into rendered mode. Now you'll notice it's very flat. In order to create the bump, I can bring in a bump node. So Shift A, and again, if you ever need to search for a node, just click on the top here and you can type it in, bump. Or you can press Shift A and vector is where bump is. Normal maps are far more effective, but bump maps will do for quick, easy hacks. I can actually go straight from the color into the height and then from the normal to the normal, which is the bumpiness of an object. Now it's offered a little bit, but not much, and we can increase that with the distance, maybe up to 2. Might be a bit too much to be fair, so maybe we'll stick with 0.1. And there we go. Without, it's quite flat, and then adding the normal gives it that bit of bump. Now if you're doing Pbr shading, you should have a normal map that will go into your normal map. It will be similar to your image texture, but have that height information. If you did it that way, and you're getting problems, it may be because your normal map, if I duplicate this one with Shift D, needs to be on non-color data, and then go into the normal map, and then go into your normal map and into your normals. Okay, so let's try the next one. There we go, see how you get on with that. It's a sort of blobby metal ball. I'll give you a hint for this one, it's noisy bump. Okay, so if I press Shift spacebar again to come out of full screen mode and click on my ball, you can see how I've done this. I've added a noise procedural texture into a bump map and into a principled shader. So I'll show you how I set that up. I'll close that down, press new. Instead of the diffuse, I'll change it with Shift S, shader, principled BSDF, and I'll press Shift A again and add a texture, not an image texture, although you could do this with an image texture, but this one was a noise texture, a procedural texture. Now let's see what that would look like. That's what the noise looks like, but I want it to go straight into my bump. So Shift A, vector, bump. And instead of into the color, I'll bring it into the height, then the normal to the normal, and I'll just cut that off with Control left click to create the little knife. There's my bump. I think mine was blue, maybe about there, and it was metallic as well. So put the metallic up to 1, which looks kind of nice, and I believe I decreased the scale or something. In fact, I don't think I did. I think I just put the distance up. Yeah. There we go. Now it's not that reflective. I'd like it to be a bit more reflective, so bring down the roughness. And there we go. That's what I'm after. Okay, and the last one looks like this. So see how you get on with that. Okay, so this one was nice and simple. I just wanted to show the effects of the bump. So let's click on our object and see what I've got. I've simply got an emission shader. I've actually changed the color of the light. You may not have noticed that, but it's got quite a bluey shade. And I put the strength up a fair bit. That's why it looks white instead of blue. So in order to do that, let's cross that one out, create a new one, and this time I'll just delete this, add shader emission. Just a slightly different way of going about it rather than pressing Shift S. hook that up to the surface, and there's my emission. Now there's the strength turning up, and then I can change the colour of that light with the colour. Okay, so that's a quick set of exercises for you. One last tip that I forgot to mention is you may want to change over to GPU Compute in your Render tab. If you've got a reasonable graphics card, then your computer will run a bit faster. If you don't see that option, then go up to File, User Preferences, System, and then just make sure it's on Cycles Compute Device, CUDA, and then you should be able to choose your graphics card. Do a quick test though to make sure you do see an improvement. It's not always the case, but generally if you've got a good graphics card, you'll see a great improvement if you change that setting. Okay, so do check out gabit.co.uk for more courses like this, and there'll be more on the way in the future. Thanks for watching.